Anyway, I need to explain the title of the book, Hunting Magic Eels. Like, why would I buy a book about magical eels? Here's a fun fact about authors. You don't get to pick your title. You have a working title, and the publisher picks it. So they went with Hunting Magic Eels. The reason why it's called Hunting Magic Eels is because the very first line of the book is, we were hunting magic eels. We were in Wales, not a whale like the mammal in the water. Wales, the country, so next to England. We were in Wales on the Celtic island of St. Dwynwen. St. Dwynwen was the patron saint of lovers in Wales. She was like their St. Valentine's. And the reason why she was the Welsh St. Valentine is because in her abbey there was this enchanted well, like a water well. And in the well were like these magical eels. And the legend was, if you took a handkerchief from your lover, tossed it into the well, and the eels disturbed the handkerchief, that was a sign that your lover would be faithful to you for life. Obviously, this became a very lucrative business for the abbey because people would just travel to the well and throw in tokens of their love to see if they would be faithful over time. And so that's what we were doing. We were looking for the well. Janice seemed more intent on finding the well than me. The handkerchief in hand. I was like, whoa, what's that about? Why are you so suspicious, sweetie? Anyway, my wife Jan is over here. She's a theater teacher. Anyway, we were looking for hunting magic eels that day. And the point of the book was like, hey, that's a really different world. Like, we go to premarital counseling. 500 years ago, they consulted magical eels. And it shows just a story about the last 500 years, how the world has really changed. A world that was like stuffed with supernatural wonders. Faith was a cultural given. People believed in God. And not just faith, all the kind of spooky stuff on the edges of the Christian faith. From witchcraft to the occult to magical creatures that lived in the forest. We live in a very different age. We live in a secular age, a technological age, a materialistic age, a scientific age, where doubt, atheism, agnosticism, and the rise of the nuns. And my wife reminded me that I always have to remind her that it's not N-U-N, it's not those nuns, it's N-O-N-E-S. The rise of the nuns, that on like the census survey, religious affiliation, what are you? The rise of the people to check the box that says none. No religious affiliation. All of that has been on the rise. And so the book was written about how to kind of recapture enchantment, a supernatural sense of wonder in an age where a lot of that stuff becomes increasingly hard to believe in. So, but before I get to that, I want to kind of try to split this conversation into two parts. The first part is I want to talk about doubt directly. And this is for the doubters in the room, but this is also for a church that wants to be hospitable to doubters. People who raise their hand and want to ask hard questions and feel like you will listen to those questions. So I'm going to say 5 things about doubt, and then I'll shift to this idea about recovering like enchantment. So I want to talk right now what I call in my research summer versus winter Christianity. Okay, here's a story. Jan and I, when we were in college, we met and we knew each other were believers. Right? We knew that much about each other. And so that seemed to check the box, right? We married somebody of faith. And yet we discovered that our kind of religious sensibilities differed in significant ways. Where like sermons that she would hear that would go like, that was awesome. And I'd be like, I found it problematic. or songs that blessed her, I'd be like, that lyric, you know. And so we found this kind of weird kind of tension. And it culminated, and Jana can correct me, so I hate telling stories about our marriage, but she's heard this story before. I think we were driving to a Bible study. We were in Dallas at that time. We were driving to a Bible study, and she had asked this question about what do you think God does in this particular situation? I was like, I don't really think you want to know what I think about that. She's like, no, I do. I said, well, if I tell you, don't freak out. And then I told her, and she freaked out. I think, didn't you go visit our pastor, our preacher, that week? It's like, Richard said X about the Lord. Is he a Christian? And we hashed it out. That was still a believer. But we discovered what I called in that early part of our marriage, the difference between maybe a summer Christian and a winter Christian. But we've been on a mutual journey. I'm more like, I would say, like a early autumn Christian now, and she's like a late sprinkler Christian. We've been good for each other. And at this point, you're like, what do you mean by summer and winter Christian? Here's the idea. There seems to be kind of a working assumption in most families, churches, even universities where I work, that doubt or I'll call relational distress in the relationship with God is symptomatic of a problem, right? To have doubts, to have questions, to say hard things to the Lord, that's problematic. And so thus, when anybody expresses these things in a marriage or in a church or in a home, that if that doubt is pathological, it is deemed to be pathological, the only response is to somehow like hand your kid a book. Here, read this. It'll satisfy the doubt. Try to answer it. Try to hush it. Because if we give voice to it in the community, everybody will start getting nervous. Okay? What I want to suggest is that doubt and faith go hand in hand. It might seem very paradoxical, but they exist in the same experiential space. We don't need to be afraid of it. And you might say, well, what's the evidence of that? And it goes deep into Scripture, how relational distress, and by relational distress, I mean just kind of being angry at God. I'm going to get to more about anger at God here in a little bit, is okay. There's some speech in Scripture that is very, very risky. I'm going to read a passage out of Lamentations here in a moment. To the point where you're like, I'm not sure if you should say that. And it's in Scripture. That should give us some comfort that the strongest emotions you have can be forms of prayer. That they are not your ticket out. They are permission to stay and scream. And in fact, there is a phenomenon called emotional atheism. Emotional atheism is there's a trauma in your life, maybe a death, and people get so mad at God, they stop believing in Him. Now, if that sounds psychologically weird, it is. Think about that. You're so mad at God, you stop believing in Him. That should be impossible, right? You can't be mad at something that doesn't exist. And yet, this is a common story among many people, that I'm so mad, I have stopped believing. And so and one of the reasons why I think that happens is people don't feel like that their relational distress is going to be treated hospitably in faith communities. So to just give you a sense of what I mean by that, I'm going to read a bit of Scripture from Lamentations. This is rarely read out loud at church, but it is in Scripture. And what I mean by winter Christianity is a space where praise and trust commingles with doubt and distress. They are not polar opposites. They are all tangled up together in a space. So let me illustrate this. When I was in college, we used to sing a song. Does anybody know the song, The Steadfast Love of the Lord Never Ceases? Do you guys know that song? Okay. So the steadfast Lord, write this. Steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will trust in Him. You know that? Does anybody know what happens right before that song? You're about to find out. Let's do this then. I am a man, Lamentations 3. I'm a man who has seen affliction under the rod of God's wrath. He has driven me, right? This is the Lord. He has driven me and brought me into darkness without any light. And surely against me, the Lord turns His hand again and again the whole day. He has made my flesh and my skin waste away. He has broken my bones. He has besieged me and enveloped me with bitterness and tribulation. He has made me dwell in darkness like the dead long ago. He has walled me in about so that I cannot escape. He has made my chains heavy. And though I cry for help, He shuts out my prayers. He has blocked my ways with stones, and He has made my paths crooked. He, the Lord, is like a bear. lying in wait for me, like a lion in hiding. He turned aside my steps, and he tore me to pieces, and he's made me desolate. Like, that's harsh, right? God is a bear that attacks you out of the woods and mangles you and leaves you for dead on the side of the road. Remember I said risky language? It gets worse. Sorry. It gets worse. He bent his bow and set me as a target for his arrow. That's harsh. But some of us feel that way, do we not? Like God puts you up against the wall and says, please stand there and I will shoot arrow after arrow at you. And you just go through the day. It's like, anything else? This has been a delightful day. Can't any more? Like we just feel like God is playing target practice with us. He's bent his bow and made us the target. He has drove into my kidneys the arrows of his quiver. And I've become the laughing stock of all peoples and the object of their taunts all day long. He has filled me with bitterness and sated me with wormwood. He has made my teeth ground on gravel. He has made me cower in ashes. My soul is bereft of peace, and I have forgotten what happiness is. And so I say, my endurance has perished, and so has my hope in the Lord. And I will remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall, and my soul continually remembers it, and it is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I will have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, and his mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will trust in him. We have failed to sing the entire song. We just jumped to the end. And what I mean by summer Christianity is that kind of happy, unproblematic Christianity that just wants to skip to the happy ending. And what happens is when you kind of skip to that happy ending, some of our experiences kind of get left behind. And then when we bring in our troubles and our questions into spaces like this, and people feel like, well, you can't say that out loud, right? That is a sign of a faith problem. And then you kind of start going, I guess these aren't my people. I guess this question is too hard. It's too difficult. And so let me just say this to the church, and then I'll say this to people who struggle with these, you are the winter Christians. Because that's what Jan and I discovered about ourselves, that she was more of a summer Christian and I was more of a winter Christian. Like my favorite psalm is Psalm 88, and the final line of Psalm 88 is, the darkness is my closest friend. That's how the psalm ends. It just goes all the way dark. I've never found that on a shirt in Mardell in my life. I mean, I'm like, that's a happy place, Mardell. I'm very blessed in there. They tell me that all the time. And I'm like, I'm looking for the darkness is my closest friend shirt. Is that on a cup or a t-shirt? And they're like, no. It's in the Bible, though. I'm not as chilly as I used to be. I've talked a little bit about this morning. Now, let me just say this about the church, right? To just become a place where that first part of the song is also given care. And yes, we will praise as well. But let us keep our praise truthful. Let us keep our praise honest. And I think that's one of the gifts. And let me be clear, we need everybody. Now, some of you, whenever I talk about this, some of you that are the summer Christians feel a little bit on the hook, like that you are the happy, clappy Christians and therefore superficial. Let me be clear about this. You can't build a church on a bunch of winter Christians like me, okay? Like, we get nothing done, Like we just sit around angsty and anxious the whole time. Like, is any of this real? Like, people, we need to get things done, okay? And the summer Christians, they believe. They have in Scripture, as we call the gift of faith. And in a supernatural way. It is, and people like this. Everybody knows it was like the gift of faith? And I admire it. They just got it. We need them. And so I think we need them to have the gift of faith, but we also need the people in the room asking hard questions to keep the Christian witness honest. At my school, I teach at Abilene Christian University, and they call it the ACU bubble. All right? This little world of like happy Christians. And it is just a thing that a lot of students just step away from. They're just like this, the mainline conversation of Christianity at our school, and you guys would probably look at the mainline conversation of Christianity here at Little Rock. It's just not anything that connects with me. I just got kind of this dark streak in my mind, and I come here, and everybody seems all put together and pretty happy. So let me just say this. to you as a church, become hospitable to those questions. Welcome them. They can exist together. They're not always a sign of a faith problem. So that's my first thing. Be welcoming to winter Christians. The other thing, those of you that are winter Christians, I want to say something about what I'll call theological worlds. Okay, theological worlds. This comes from a guy named Paul Jones. Paul Jones wrote a book called Theological Worlds, and he said, here's the thing. Everybody in the room today has what he calls, this is technical words, he calls it an obsessio. It's where we get obsession. Everybody has an obsession, a theological obsession. And then he says everybody therefore has what he calls an epiphania. You don't like those words, basically translated means everybody has a sense of what the problem is, and therefore what the solution would be, right? And he says this, everybody has a theological world in the room. That is to say, if I sat you down, I go like, what's wrong with the world? What's wrong with you? Like, what's broken in you? What is broken in the world? We all have just a general sense that the world is not right, amen? Like, everybody gets that. He says, but everybody has kind of a different take on what exactly they think is broken. The main theological world of Christianity, at least Protestant Christianity, I would say would be human guilt before a holy and just God. Like, your problem is that you are a sinner. Back, remember we used to evangelize people in Romans. All have fallen short of the glory of God. That's your problem. That's your predicament. And if human guilt is your problem, the solution is straightforward, right? The atoning sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, who died for your sins. That's the solution to your guilt problem. Now, I do lead a Bible study in a maximum security prison. And in a maximum security prison, guilt still is the presenting problem. Can I be forgiven for what I have done? That is the theological world for many of the men out there. But I'm saying this out loud because that, from a little young age, that was never my theological world. I'm going to say something that I probably should not say out loud. But I have never really been overly motivated to worry about if I, Richard Beck, was going to hell. It was just never a question that really captured my attention. I always worried about things like sex trafficking, domestic violence, right? The Holocaust, the pain and suffering. My theological world was always the deep, like I wasn't, people were like, you're a sinner, go to your youth group camp and nail your sins to a cross. How many times you guys do that? You nail your, I'm like, I get it, but I'm like, so I'm mean to my sister. Like, that's not my main problem. My main problem is like all of this stuff going on in the world that would have just crash over me, just waves of sadness for what I thought was broken in the world. And you need a different kind of savior for that kind of brokenness. Because the problem of the world isn't guilt, it's this deep sense of, I still this day, I think about, we're all singing these songs about our own salvation, and they're very important, but I'm like, some kid was getting picked on today in a playground. Who's going to stick up for that kid? That's the stuff that would constantly upset. And it just didn't fit in the church that I was in. Because the theological world of my church was sin and grace. And mine was like the problem of pain and suffering and evil. And I was searching for answers in my faith community for those kinds of problems. But I never did really ultimately find them. Here's my point. Some of us will live as like theological minorities in faith communities. Like the theological world of your church might not suit you. That's okay. It's okay to be a minority in a faith community. To kind of say the theological world of this church isn't necessarily mine, but that doesn't mean anything's wrong with them, and neither does it mean anything's wrong with you. So I just want you to kind of own that. Just kind of, you might have your own kind of spiritual personality that might put you it's not a one size, let me say it this way. What I'm trying to say is it's not a one size fits all deal. Where there's a one way to think about this thing and it suits everybody in the room. So parents, one of the things you might attend to is like, maybe my child is in a different theological world than me. Maybe what was my predicament is not their predicament. What do they think is broken in the world? And then how do you intersect Christianity with that particular kind of brokenness? And it's not about guilt in the atoning sacrifice of Jesus. It is about Jesus who says, I have come to proclaim release to the captives, sight to the blind, to set the liberty, that Jesus. So attending to your theological world, the theological world maybe of your spouse, your children, and assuming a little bit of diversity might help us be more hospitable as people float these things. And I think one of our problems with doubt is we've kind of assumed everybody needs to be on the exact same page. We're not. Things haunt us in different ways. And the other thing I would say about that is Jones goes on to say that the relative ratio of the obsessio to the epithenia, to the questions to the answers, the solutions to the problems, those get weighed differently. Back to the summer-winter Christian thing. For summer Christians, the answers, the solution, the experience of grace or salvation is commensurate to and exceeds the problem, right? So you're living in a state of abundance. But for some of us that are on the winter Christian side, the questions, the predicaments, they always seem to just be a little bit more in excess than the answers that I have been given. So all the answers that I've ever struggled to get for myself about why God allows horrific suffering in the world have never been fully adequate. They have never matched and exceeded the weight of my questions. They're helpful, but I haven't yet got that, oh, this is why people suffer. And I realize I'm not going to get that question. And so that's another thing to pay attention to yourself. Some of us are just going to always have that kind of crackling, nagging doubt, and we carry it through a lifespan. And it doesn't ever really like settle down. The way I describe it is there are like one question Christians and two question Christians. So the one question Christian is like, why is there suffering? And the answer is because of the fall. You're like, okay, that's good. That's a good answer, Or there's free will. That's good. Or there's the devil. All right. I just want to know if somebody has an answer out there. But then some of us are like two question questions, like two question Christians. Where you're kind of like, well, there's a devil. And you're like, well, where'd he come from? what, Or how'd the snake get in the garden? Like you ask those kinds of questions. In my experience with people is the minute you ask the second question, it never ends. Like you're going to be one of those people, they're just going to be like, well, what about? And it just becomes like an onion that you just keep peeling your entire life. You just keep asking question after question after question. And so that brings me to my third point. My experience with people, especially young people who grow up at church and are starting to lose their faith in around college, is that the quality of the questions increases with your education and your intellect. But the quality of your answers is not keeping pace. Okay? So for me, I'm concerned about great suffering, like the Holocaust. Let me be very clear. VeggieTales is not able to answer what occurred at the Holocaust. Those are childlike answers that don't age well. And you got at some point dismantle and rebuild the better and better and more sophisticated answers. And one of the great frustrations I have when I see some of my college students walk off is that they are not walking off from the faith. They are walking off from the faith when they were 12 or when they were their senior Bible class. Their questions have grown, they got some answers, and they go, I don't believe that anymore. And I'm like, you shouldn't. You were 16. Right? That made sense when you were 16. But now you're 26, and you got some life in your corner now, and you need to invest in the quality of answers that are now meeting you where you are. And so I had a student in my office dealing with faith problems. And I said, well, let's begin. How do we begin? She says, I want to talk about the opening scene of Job, where the devil and God are haggling over Job. Do you remember this story? And she's like, I just don't think that's fair that God did that. And I said, okay, here's the thing. that is the most simplistic reading of Job. You know, and we can go deep into Job. You can go do a lot of research into Job and realize a lot about that. Plus, that story was not originally our story. And by that I mean that's from the Jewish scriptures. The Jewish people for 4,000 years have been talking and reflecting on Job. And we take the most simplistic reading of it and go like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm walking. There is a vast conversation that has been happening in the faith. If you funk it, Christians have been chatting about it for a long time. It is a very nerdy religion. Okay? We're a very nerdy religion. There is so much to think about. And again, my point is a deep dive into the book of Job going to answer all her questions? Probably not. She's probably one of these two-question Christians. She's probably one of these Christians where the answers won't completely satisfy. But let me encourage you not to kind of look at the worst and most simplistic version of the faith, but look at its very best. Right? Look at its very best. And take the time to invest in that. Fourth thing I want to say, before I make a switch, is this was helpful for me. In this morning, if you were not there, I told the story of my faith journey, of how for about 20 years I was probably more agnostic than I was a Christian. And I said at the time that my faith had gotten very insubstantial. I felt like I couldn't believe all the things. There's a lot to believe. I couldn't believe all the things. So I figured, like, I'll work on believing on God. That seems to be the big thing. And I'll just work on that thing. And I won't worry about much of the other stuff. I won't worry about creation or evolution. I just ain't going to go down that rabbit hole. You know, it's too much. I just work on this one thing. And I mentioned how my faith had gotten really fragile and insubstantial after that season. What carried me through? I mentioned this briefly. What carried me through was this. And I'll recommend it to any doubters or agnostics in the room. And I recommend it to my students all the time. Unfortunately, Christianity tends to be very idea-driven, very, very verbal. And so we focus on what I'll call orthodoxy, right belief. Do you believe the things, and do you believe the right things? Okay? And we'll talk a lot about believing the right things. Well, you can't believe that. You got to believe it this particular way. Believe the right things. And so we obsess about right believing. Okay? Churches of Christ are very familiar with what right belief means, right? We have right beliefs, and there are wrong beliefs, and we have the right beliefs, and we just obsess about that level. But what I try to preach to my students is orthopraxy. Not orthodoxy, orthopraxy. Not right belief, but right practice. When all the mental stuff is a buzz of confusion, and I don't know about any of this, you still have to live your day. We still have to act. We still need to decide what is good, and what is evil. And so what I tell my students is, when you can't get all the ideas, lean into the practices, of the practicing of the faith, the goodness of the way of Jesus. And you might be like, well, what do you mean by that? Here's an example. So I was with a student a couple years ago, and he was asking all the things, from evolution and creation and the problem of evil and suffering. We're walking through all the greatest hits of doubts and skepticism. And it was a long, enjoyable conversation. Like, I love those kinds of conversations. Again, very nerdy religion. We just talk all day. I love it. But by the end of the conversation, his name was Brad. And I said, Brad, before we go, you've asked me a lot of questions. I've tried to answer, and I realize that none of these answers are fully satisfactory. But let's keep peeling the onion. Let's do this again. But before we go, can I ask you a question? He said, okay. I said, Brad, do you want to live a beautiful life? And he wasn't expecting that question. And he goes, what? I go, do you want to live a beautiful life? And he said, well, yeah, of course I do. I said, great. Then what's your aesthetic? By that I mean, how do you judge beauty? Because we all have to have one. We all have to look at something and go like, that is praiseworthy, that is applaudable, that's a beautiful life. You look at this life, this person, and say, that's it, right? That's the model. And I said, so Brad, one of the things that has helped me stay with this thing, despite all the questions we've been hashing out, is I've discovered this about myself. That whenever I see something on social media, like a little random act of kindness, and I find my heart like swelling, or my eyes tearing up a little bit, I go, what I've noticed about myself is whenever I see something like that in the world, I think to myself, that is exactly the sort of thing that Jesus would have done. And I said, so one of the reasons I'm a Christian, Brad, is for artistic reasons. Like I like the way the guy paints. And if I have to pick a way to live a life, I find this way of love and kindness and generosity, standing up to the bullies of the world and sticking up for the little guy. I find it remarkably compelling. And while I am kicking around all the big questions, do I believe, do I not believe, I know I want to live a beautiful life. And I can tell you the end of that story, but that comment haunted Brad and eventually kind of did some good work in his life. Do you believe or not? Okay, we can talk about do you believe or not, but do you want to live a beautiful life? And if you do, what's your aesthetic? How do you judge? That's what I mean by orthopraxy, living the faith, while all the questions are still kind of raging around us. And the last thing I want to say is, this isn't just for, unbelievers. What I mentioned this morning was that faith for all of us in the pews feels more fragile. Charles Taylor describes that the impact of the secular world isn't that massive amounts of us. Yes, atheism and agnosticism is on the rise slightly, but it's not like tons of us are just becoming atheists. It goes up every year a little bit. Like it's around like 20 to 25% right now, atheists and agnostics. It just ticks up a little bit every year. The biggest impact on our faith isn't necessarily the rise of unbelief, but that sense, even in our pews, that our own faith feels doubtable, contestable. That we ask our own selves late at night, is any of this real or true? That kind of haunting, and the reason why, John and I were talking about this right before this, is that because it used to be that faith was like a cultural given. Now it's a matter of choice. And because faith is a choice, it's always going to kind of be in your mind as this thing that can be opted out of. And because it's chosen, it feels like provisional. I can choose differently at any moment. We all have that kind of sense, like, if I don't want to go to church, I can not go to church. And if I don't want to believe, I don't have to believe. It's that sense of choosing the faith that renders it fragile. And I don't know if until like the entire world becomes Christian again, it's always going to have that kind of crackling sense of breakability, we might say. So we're all, in one sense, dealing with this in our churches. So those are some things I just want to say just about doubt and being hospitable to doubt and recognizing your theological world, practicing the faith when you're struggling with belief, investing in better answers as your questions get better, and then just lastly, just owning up to the fact that we're all dealing with this. Everybody's dealing with this at some level, except for the people who have the gift of faith. They're looking at me right now as like I'm really weird, Like my dad. What do you mean God isn't real? That's the most obvious thing in, how can you doubt that? It's like doubting gravity with Dad. Just be hospitable to each other across those. Here's my great worry about stuff like this in the church is just mutual incomprehensibility. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. That sense that if I say something out loud and you look at me with like a kind of like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. Because what happens is people go, oh, okay. You're not my conversation partner. Like I need to find somebody who gets me. And so lean in with some curiosity. Even if you don't get it, just keep telling me more. And maybe this whole talk is helping you maybe understand a little bit about what's going on all around us right now. So how do you revitalize faith in a skeptical age? And I realize I left myself with 16 minutes. That's hilarious. Okay. So I'm going to say something very quickly because not everybody was here this morning. And so if you've heard this before, let me say it because I think it's important for everybody to say it, and I'll get to some other things. The big move I would like to make for those of you that are thinking about doubt or struggling about doubt or your faith feels fragile, how do you revitalize faith? This morning I shared in this class the research from Andrew Root. And Andrew Root argues that a lot of us think that what we're dealing with in this age is a crisis of belief, was kind of what I've been talking about. Like we don't believe these things anymore. His argument is that we're actually dealing with a crisis of attention, a crisis of perception or of seeing. And he uses the research from Daniel Simons from Harvard on what's called attention blindness. And again, I'll say the study again. So in the study on attention blindness, some of you guys have seen this on a YouTube clip where it comes up and says, this is an awareness test. And then you see two basketball teams, a team in white jerseys and a team in dark jerseys. And they say, count the number of passes the team in the white jersey makes. And they start moving around, passing the ball, the dark jersey team trying to intercept the ball. And you're counting the passes. And it ends. It says, how many passes did you count? And you say, 16. And then it says, but did you see the dancing gorilla? Now, how many of you did not see the dancing gorilla the first time you saw this online? You can go online. Yeah. Daniel Simons has discovered in his lab about 50% of participants did not see a dancing gorilla. That as they were watching the passes being made, a guy in a gorilla suit comes out into the middle of the screen, like does a dance, and then exits. And you know this because the video rewinds and replays, and like there was a gorilla on the screen the entire time, and you didn't see it. And I raise that again to make the point that Andrew Root is making, is that what he argues that's happening in the secular age isn't a crisis of believing things, because that's what my students think. They think this Christianity thing is a long list of beliefs, and then they got to force themselves to believe in unbelievable things, akin to like forcing themselves to believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Like I just can't muster the ability to believe that. I find it so incredible. But Root says what's happening is not a crisis of belief, but a perception that there's something very obvious right in front of us. And it's a study on what's called attention blindness. That your attention, the way you attend to your life in the world, the way social media captures your attention, has caused you to see things in the world, bring those things into view, but some like very obvious things are sitting right in front of us. Now, if it seems like I'm insinuating that God is a dancing gorilla, that's what I'm insinuating right now. God is the dancing gorilla. The obvious thing in your life, the sacred, holy presence that has been in front of you your entire life, but we are not perceiving it. I think that is a better way to start a conversation about faith, to ask ourselves that question. So how do you bring that in the last couple minutes here? And John, I think it's about time when we want to, if you guys have a question for me or you want us to talk about, write those down and we'll turn those in here in a minute as we make a turn. What are some things that can help us kind of attend to the dancing gorilla? Well, one of the things that's interesting about this secular age is that as secularism has swept over the West and rates of unbelief are on the rise, we have also seen a correlated rise in a variety of mental health issues, right? We are increasingly godless, and yet we're also very anxious. Anxiety is on the rise, depression is on the rise, suicide is on the rise, drug addiction is on the rise, loneliness is on the rise. And I think those two things are linked. Or the way I say it to my students, God may be dead. That's what Nietzsche declared. God is dead. God may be dead, but we sure do miss him. Right? There has been a hole that's been left in our lives without God. And I call that hole in the book the ache. So the ache is like if God is, this is probably blasphemous to say, but if God is dead, then the chalk outline of where God used to be in our lives, that hole is the ache. Let me describe where the two places where the ache shows up and where I notice it about my own life. This goes to a book, Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. A lot of people think it's the best psychology book ever written. So read that book before you read anything I write. Read Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning was written by Viktor Frankl. He was a Jewish psychiatrist, and he was arrested and taken to Auschwitz during the Holocaust. And so as a psychiatrist, he's just looking at what's happening to the inmates from a mental health perspective. Very unique perspective to have inside a concentration camp as he watches the plight of his fellow prisoners. And so the first part of the book is just kind of him accounting through a psychological eye kind of what happened in the concentration camps. How do people put up with like the worst imaginable suffering possible? And then the last half of the book, he unpacks his findings from his observations into a therapeutic practice. And as you can tell from the title of the book, meaning is critical to this. For example, when the people would come off the trains, the cattle cars, they would get to a guy and they would point to the right or they would point to the left. And you got pushed to the right. And your wife and your children went to the left. And suddenly you have descended into hell. And if I came to you that day and said, why are you putting up with this? Why are you fighting to get to the end of the day? I mean, this day is the worst day ever. It is hell on earth. And you'd be answered because of my wife and my children. And so you're fighting to be reunited with your loved ones. But then, within a few days, you are told, the smoke in the sky, that is your loved ones. That day one, they went right into the gas. Now you have a crisis of meaning. The thing that made you get up in the morning and go through this day to fight hard to survive has been robbed from you. And he says when that would happen to an inmate, when they got to that crossroads, something had to happen. One of two things. Many at that point would give up. They would just lay in bed and not get up. They would stop eating, or they would run for the fences, or they would be shot running. Or they would come up with a different meaning. Like, I have to survive because I am now the repository of their memories and their stories. If I die, who they were, what they were, will die with me. And so I will persist in fighting for this, for the sake of them, to carry on their memories. I will survive this for them, even though they've passed on. And sometimes, if you read something like Elie Wiesel's, powerful book, Night, about his Holocaust experience, some people, they just whittled down their meaning to simply this. I got to survive this hell, because if I don't survive, nobody will be a witness. And that became the meaning. Somebody has to tell the story, because if we all die, nobody will know what it was like. So I will survive to be a witness to this. And Frankl has said that's what drives our mental health. We put a story together that gives our life meaning and purpose and context. And then when life hits us sideways, we got to kind of gather it all back up again and go okay, now what does this mean? My life. So I worked in a psychiatric hospital. There was a guy in there I tell the story in the book. He was an EMT. His job was literally as an emergency tech. His job was literally saving lives. And as you can imagine, that gave his life immense meaning. He gets up every day and he saves people. But the reason why he was in the psych hospital is because he had committed or tried to commit suicide. Why? Because on the job, he had a traumatic back injury, and he could no longer do that job anymore. Because you got to do a lot of lifting and breaking people out of cars and burning buildings and stuff like that. And he hurt his back, and he was regulated to a desk job. And suddenly, he's at a crossroads. Is my life meaningful anymore? And he decided it wasn't. And so we were in the psych hospital trying to put back together a story that would give his life meaning. The ache in the modern world is mainly driven, in my estimation, by that constant sense that the thing that gives your life purpose is extraordinarily fragile. It is one bad day away. One phone call at 3 a.m., right? One divorce proceeding, red slip from the employer, or maybe a pandemic that just washes away our dreams. Because when God is dead, we all have to kind of like, I don't know, like conjure up some reason to get out of bed in the morning. Like make a story up for ourselves. And the thing is, a lot of us are so self-aware, like we know we're making up the story for ourselves, you know? Like you can see what your mind's doing, how you're telling yourself the story. And so it just seems very false. And so one of the things I speak to when I try to raise a question about God is just that sense of fragility, the story that we're living. Or if it's not the big bad thing, it's just this general sense that nothing matters anymore. Like life has been without God, like we want our lives to have kind of like a heroic arc to it. Otherwise, we just live a kind of a flat, superficial life. So with my students, I'll say, okay, you might not get this God conversation, like, but are you bored a lot? And they're like, yes. Like, haven't we all felt that? You go to Netflix, and there's nothing to watch. And then you go to Apple TV, and Loki 2. No, that's Disney. Right? Apple 2 is like Ted Lasso. So Ted Lasso episode hasn't dropped, so there's nothing to watch. You go to Disney, and there's nothing to watch. You're on Hulu. How many been there? This general sense, like, I have all the options in the world, and I'm bored. Or that general sense, like, you know, the most interesting thing about you, gentlemen, is your whiskey collection. Really? That's the most interesting thing about you, your exquisite taste in whiskey. I know, I'm preaching here. Sorry. You know, that just said, because, and so I tell my students, I said, here's the thing, the modern world wants you godless and unhappy. And the modern world wants you godless and happy for this reason, because if you're godless and unhappy, we have something to sell you. And Google, the algorithms on Google know it. Like, you know that. Google knows exactly what you like to buy. You're like, oh, fishing rods. All right? Or shoes. I mean, I don't know what your algorithm looks like, but it knows exactly your gender, your race, your political affiliation, what you like to buy. And it's churning all the time, putting things in front of you saying, this will get you through another day or week. You know? You know, who are you? Okay, I was about to say something harsh. Should I say it? I shouldn't say it. But who are we after yesterday's loss? Oh, see, I did it. You know, you're like, now you're meddling. I know. You know my point? You know, we live for these. Now listen, for those of you that weren't here this morning, I've been rooting for the Razorbacks my whole life. Okay? Get my point though? That we start living for these products. You know, and it's crazy. You see weird like pathologies. Like I said this to my students today, you know, and some of you older people aren't going to understand this, but the younger people know exactly what I'm talking about. Like I said, Star Wars fans are one step away from being suicide bombers. How many of you have seen the behavior of Star Wars fans? Those people are crazy. Like, have you ever walked into a middle Star Wars fan thing and say, I think The Last Jedi was a good movie? They're like, what? They'll freak out on you. Like, no, now you think I'm kidding. You're like, that's an extreme statement. No. The gaming community, the fan base community, they send death threats to people who disagree. Death threats about franchises that are banking money on us because we are godless and unhappy. We're not looking forward to heaven, but we can't wait for the next season, right, the next rollout of the Marvel Universe. That's the thing we look forward to. Or we look forward to the next season, whatever it is. That's the ache. Another thing that I would point you to, that's kind of a negative move. point to our deep unease in the modern world without God. Without some, and if you don't want to talk about God, just it's a sense of depth or transcendence that gives our life kind of a weight that if it doesn't have, we will be at sea in a consumeristic culture. Does that make sense? We're all looking for some sort of weight that transcends our entertainments or our hobbies. Nothing wrong with the things I've mentioned. But we do, after a season, start to feel like it's all pretty shallow. What's another thing that I would say that can help with our fragile faith? I would describe it as the primacy of the invisible. That's from Joseph Ratzinger, the primacy of the invisible. This caught my attention the other day. You guys know all those forest fires out in California, right? Did you all see that picture of the forest fires were approaching like a forest of the sequoias, like the oldest trees in America? You know how old these trees are? Over 2,000 years old. It's a 2,000-year-old tree. And did y'all see them wrapping like foil around them? So they were wrapping foil around these sequoias to protect them from the wildfires. So when I mention the primacy of the invisible, what I mean is there's something about this scientific age that suggests if it is not available to the scientific apparatus, it's not real. Right? Everything invisible is make-believe. But what I'm saying is that is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, that what is invisible is make-believe. No. What is invisible is the most true. What is true about that sequoia wrapped in foil is unseen in any scientific laboratory. It's meaning. Right? You can do organic chemistry and analyze that tree, but what it means, the reason why we're wrapping foil around it is because of what it means. And what it means is invisible and not available to the science. What is most true about that sequoia is what is invisible to it. And I would argue that we need to be more aggressive on that point. What is most true is the invisible things, right? And I'll come to that at the very end of our lives, at the end of this conversation. I misspeak all the time. Yeah, that's what Jan's been saying her whole life. You know what your dad means. She has to interpret all the time for me. I'm trying to pay attention to my time, so I'm rushing. Let me say one more thing about that kind of primacy of the invisible. In fact, I'll just end on this because you guys have been very patient. We want to get to your questions. The most true thing about you is the invisible thing. In the book, I call it Psychologists Have Discovered. Like what is like one of the number one predictors of like mental health? So you've drugged yourself out of Sunday night. I might as well give you the secret to happiness. Like you deserve it. So what's the secret to happiness? Like this is straight up scientific studies. What is the number one predictor of mental health? The happiest people in the world. What do they got? And psychologists have landed on a variable that is correlated with the happiest people in the world. And it's called, I talk about it in the book, mattering. Mattering. And mattering is just the conviction that you matter. Like if you believe, now and that makes sense, right? If you believe that you matter, then you can see how that provides a stable foundation. The alternative is what's called conditional self-esteem. Conditional self-esteem is you matter if, right? You matter if he said, this boy or girl at school will date you. That is what will make you matter. You matter if you have the job where you're saving lives, right? On and on. You matter if some calculus of worth is working out for you. But as we all know, the if is the toxic part. The if, the condition, you matter if. That's going to go up and down. But mattering says you matter no matter what. Now, I don't know about you, but you might be like, well, how do you get there? How do you get to mattering? Because it's hard. Have you tried to breathe that into somebody? How many of you guys have tried to talk mattering into a child? Like you're trying to convince them that they're worth something, that they matter. And they're just like, yeah, talk, Mom. You know? How many of you sat across from a friend and tried to talk mattering into them? And how many of us have been in front of a mirror trying to talk mattering into ourselves? Those words don't penetrate very far because we don't believe what people are telling us. And to me, that is a place where I spend a lot of time with my own, I spend a lot of time with my own children. Like somebody, I forget who it was in this room, said, you know, my son doesn't feel like he needs church a whole lot because he's already a good person. You know, he's like doing, he's a good person. Isn't that enough? And so I would say, you know, maybe we don't like lean into that right now, but maybe we lean into this issue of mattering. A lot of my students are good people, but they deal with a lot of shame and inadequacy, right? It's all that anxiety and all that stuff I've been talking about. I lean into that. I'm like Jesus is amening your social justice. Like he's on it, you know. It's one of the reasons I'm passionate about Jesus. The issue is not the social justice piece, but this piece, the mattering on your when you don't fit in with your peers. Like who are you? As I said this morning, on your worst day, in the midst of your failure. So I want to end on this, and then we'll start taking our questions. Okay, Jonathan? I'm a little over, but I want to share this. In my book, I tell this story. So Chris Arnaud was a photojournalist, and he wrote a book called Dignity. And so he did this tour through rural and urban America, talking to people, interviewing people, taking pictures of people that he said were like on the back row of the American dream, right? Very poor urban settings, very poor rural settings. Chris Arnaud was a physicist and an agnostic, okay? And he said, but everywhere I went in America, trying to talk to the people on the back row of the American dream, because I kept finding myself sitting in churches. Because the people that I was looking for were in churches. And so I sat in these churches to try to understand, as an atheist, as a scientist, you know, what is this God thing? And it comes out in the title of his book. His title of his book is called Dignity. And the power of faith to convey mattering. It's not, your mattering isn't, let me say it this way. Your mattering is not a therapeutic journey to convince yourself. It is a gift you receive through the grace of God. Right? You cannot conjure this up because you know you don't believe yourself, or you know how much you've always lied to yourself. Right? You are the least trustworthy witness. It's something that has to be said over you and to you, and that makes it unconditional because it doesn't matter what you think about yourself. And so my favorite story about this, and I'll end on this, he's in, I think, New York City talking to Keisha. Keisha was an addict and a prostitute. And so he's just interviewing Keisha this day, and to me it's like the most beautiful vision of mattering there is. He says, Keisha was standing alone by a trickling fire hydrant. She was washing her face. She was working, wearing red thigh-high faux leather red boots and leopard print pants, and waving at whatever car or truck passed by. And I had seen her before, and she had always smiled at me and waved. And so we talked, and over the next half hour, she told me her life story. She told me how her mother's pimp put her out on the streets when she was 12, and how she had her first child when she was 13, and how she was addicted to heroin. And so I ended the interview by asking her how she wanted to be photographed. So I ended by asking her the question I asked everyone that I photographed. How do you want to be described? And she replied without a pause, as who I am, a prostitute, a mother of 6, and a child of God. To me, that's mattering, right? You can be at the bottom, but that dignity, that I might be a prostitute, and I might be a heroin addict, but I'm a child of God. And that becomes the ground floor of mental health. Because if you question that piece, it's an abyss beneath. And that's the cement of the foundation, that you are a child of God. And the only way to achieve it is not talking yourself into it, but opening your hands in grace and saying, that is who I am and I receive it as a gift. John, let's do some questions.
Okay. Nelson, can you start taking those questions? Here you go, Brother Richard.
Thanks.
Nelson is going to be taking those questions. Let me start while we're receiving those. So this event is called Agnostics Anonymous. Remember how in the book Dominion he talks about the bringing in of the word agnostic? It's like choosing to put everything, because it's the word agnostic means not knowing under the scientific kind of label.
Mm-hmm.
And so your talk on invisible, like the invisible stuff is the most real stuff about us. Agnostic, that feels kind of like a dodge, but if we're honest, everybody is agnostic. All of us, because you can't put God under a test tube or a microscope. What is there? You didn't get too much into the science, where science advances. We think God must leave. Can you talk about how? Can you talk about how you talk about that?
Yeah. So I think one of the things so better answers to our questions, like I said, so we try to think through God's relationship with the world. And so one of the answers that I found helpful is that we tend to frame God's relation to the world in competitive terms. That where I exert my agency, God must evacuate that space. So as science advances, God retreats. And so the relationship between God and the world is fundamentally competitive. And so one of the things the great theologians have taught us is that God doesn't compete with creation. Your agency, your freedom, your choice, what science understands, doesn't push God out of it. God holds all things in being in a way that is unlike any relation that we understand. But our imaginations tend to just assume God is one cause among other causes in the world. And so we ask, well, why does God do this? Why does God not do that? And so and that's kind of really deep into the metaphysical weeds there. But it just helps to know to just say that when science advances, God does not retreat, because God is what makes science work. God is what makes the world comprehensible, the logos that transcends all of creation. There's a rationality there, and then our minds are governed by rationality. And that when those two things meet in cancer cures, all right, or in building bridges or the building of technology, that is a miraculous thing. It didn't have to be that way, especially if we're evolved creatures. If we're evolved creatures, the mind only exists to cause us to pass on our genes. The mind is not geared to reveal reality truthfully to us. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. There's no reason the human brain should understand or penetrate into the intelligibility of the cosmos. That's not what causes us to be the survival of the fittest. And so there is a deep mystery about why the universe is comprehensible to us. That's what Albert Einstein said. Albert Einstein says the more the universe is comprehensible, the more it becomes incomprehensible. So the idea that somehow a Darwinian mechanism could drive that matching of rationality between creation and the mind is a bit of a mystery. But anyway.
And you talk about the burning bush being like the power of God in the middle of well, never mind. That's a rabbit trail. We'll go do dinner afterwards and talk about it. Okay, Dr. Beck. I'm going to call you Dr. Beck because this
you need to call me Dr. Beck more.
Yeah. Okay, Brother Richard. So here's a question.
Okay.
Has psychology explained away all demons? What do you do with that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, to be clear, one of the things, because we've learned a lot, so let's take the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has the most robust demonology and praxis that they do. And they basically say, if somebody is expressing demonic possession, they will go through a physical workup, they will go through a mental health workup, they will process all of those things, and then at the edge of all of that, when it's all been revealed to be not reducible to human causes, it's at that point they'll turn to the supernatural. So all that to say is, again, we don't have to put psychological science in competition with that worldview. Those both can cohabitate there. So I don't think psychology has. Now, you could make an argument that what we see a lot in the New Testament was like rudimentary psychology. Like there's people that think that. They think that, for example, the demon gives epilepsy, or when people hear voices in their head, that could have been a primitive diagnosis of schizophrenia. So I'm willing to entertain in a conversation with somebody who's a skeptic and kind of say, hey, Jesus' healing ministry, do we have to understand that as the supernatural, or could we kind of understand that as like schizophrenia and other sorts of mental illness? And I'm like, I'm willing to walk with you down that path. Like when we see the guy possessed of Legion demon, he's at the end of it in his right mind. And as a psychologist, I find that a very beautiful story about processes of healing that bring us back to our right mind. And so for me, if that's an on-ramp for you, if you want to see it that way, then I'm okay to entertain that. Yeah. Now, I would not say that is all that's going on, but it does help me have a conversation that Jesus is a healer, and we can have a conversation about that. That's the other thing I would say about having conversations with people is agree where you can agree. Okay? Like don't like force people to believe all the things, but agree where you agree. So people, you think it was schizophrenia in the New Testament that Jesus was dealing with? Fine. But we agreed that Jesus was healing the afflicted. Yes. So we agree with that, and that becomes a tether to a conversation about faith.
Okay, here's one, and I would like to guide your answer. How do you live a less self-centered life and focus more on God and faith? And I've heard you say theology is a lot about location, where your rear end is, and I just think a lot about what your own story, if you weren't here this morning. But so
what's the question again?
how do you live a less self? How do you live a less self-centered life and focus more on God and faith? And I was wondering if autobiography would be a good.
Yeah, no, I think autobiography would be there. Let me. The thing I would say is that just
attention.
Yeah, I want to be helpful, so I want to try to craft my answer here because I don't want to be glib. So let me come back to this idea of social justice warriors. So a lot of my students very compassionate about social justice, and in a lot of discourses on the right, that is almost a pejorative term, right? You're just a social justice warrior. But again, agree where you can agree. Okay? Don't. If your child cares about justice, again, that's not the worst thing in the world. They care about sex trafficking. Like, that's not the worst thing in the world. Okay? So you agree with that compassion and amen that. That's a holy thing. You want to lean into that, okay? And so you don't want to kind of like treat that as a political fight with your kid. You want to see that they care about suffering people, and it's expressing itself that way. That said, to answer this question, right? But that journey, that kind of hot burn to like fight for justice is not sustainable. Like I see my students burning out all the time. And so we definitely need grace to sustain a passion for justice in our life, and grace for yourself. And so how do you become more loving? Like when it becomes sacrificial, when it becomes hard, when we're becoming selfish. I really do think acts of, this is where prayer comes in. So again, for my skeptical students, prayer just seems like magic. And for me, though, prayer isn't about asking for a long list of presents from Santa Claus. Prayer is that petition of help to become the person I want to be. Anne Lamott has a great book that says we have 3 prayers: thanks, help, and wow. That's really good, right? Gratitude, from a psychological perspective, gratitude, wonder, both highly correlated with mental health. Gratitude, wonder, but also help. And so for me, how do you become, I pray help for a lot. The other thing I'd say practically is, and this goes to another book of mine called Stranger God. I know you want to tell big stories about my life, but let me be tactical here. Like one of the things I would do is just kind of like pick a fruit of the Spirit and go at that. pick a location where you want to be kinder and work that problem. Psychologists have a thing called an implementation intention. An implementation intention is when X, do Y. This is not just for fruits of the Spirit, this is for any sort of behavior you want to change. When X, like pick a situation, like a social situation where you're going to do this. And when you find yourself in that situation, pick a goal-directed behavior. When in this situation, do X. So for example, to go back to my lovely wife. So Jana likes to talk in the morning. She's like, I describe her as the Energizer Bunny. Like when she's out of energy, that's the end of it. So at the end of the day, but she sleeps and she wakes up in the morning, and then that's when we'll process the prior day. The trouble is, I like to write in the morning with my laptop, okay? And so I find myself as a spouse, so I'm being practical with the question, how to be more loving to my spouse. I find myself often with divided attention. She wants to talk, I'm trying to get something done, and in my implementation intention is, when she sits at the table with coffee, you shut your laptop. You just work that, and that makes you more loving. So this loving thing isn't this like big jump into this becoming the beautiful person. It is rather these little tactical engagements with your selfishness or your distraction or your boredom. And you go at those in an intentional way, and that usually can help move the needle.
Okay.
But social location does matter. Yeah, you're putting yourself in different, like I went out to the prison, so on and so forth as well.
Yeah. I think it changed a lot.
It changed a lot for me, yeah.
How closely, here's the third question, how closely related is apathy to being agnostic?
I think closely, I mean, in many senses that we are struggling with kind of a cultural apathy. But again, I think that's where the culture kind of wants us, is apathetic. Because if we're apathetic and nothing really compels us or grabs our attention, then there will be some addiction waiting for you out there. I'm not talking even substance abuse addiction. It would be Instagram or something. And so there is a sense where our current economic, capitalistic, consumeristic world kind of thrives on boredom and dissatisfaction. Because if we were all contented, we would opt out of a lot of stuff. And so the most subversive thing you can do in the world is like, be content. And so, but I do think apathy, but the reason why I talk about the ache is because, like, if you read the chapter in the book, my dad said, well, the reason why people don't believe anymore is just kind of basically apathy. People just don't, they're apathetic about holy things. This is where my dad saw it. But I did the dancing gorilla thing with my dad. I said, I don't think it's that people are apathetic about holy things or church. People just don't care, that's what my dad said. People just don't care about church anymore. I said, true, that's true, I get that. But I really think it's a dancing gorilla thing because the young people have lost the vocabulary to name God in their lives. Yeah. So when they say anxiety or boredom, they're talking about God, right? There is a caring there, but the only way they can express their caring for God is in the language of mental illness now. Like they're naming this thing that they want, so they do want it. So anyway, that's kind of why I talked about the ache there, because I do think we do care, but it does express itself as kind of an apathy towards traditional religious observance, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think that's exactly right, that it's not that people have those instincts towards God have gone away. It's that it's taken a new, the ache is, I think, a really good way to talk about it. Okay, I'm interested to hear how you answer this question.
That's a long question.
It is. I work with someone who lives a beautiful Christ-like life. She's more ethical, honest, and loves the underdog more than most Christians I know. She loves God through her Muslim religion. She follows his love for all. What is the point of evangelizing someone like that? Why make her verbally profess Jesus when her orthopraxy already does?
There's a lot of different answers that could go with that. That's a really dangerous question.
So,
I think, let me kind of like sidestep the question a little bit and say this. One of the things I do wish Christians would be known for, it would be good for our let's say our reputation if we were more non-anxious presences in the world, especially as being hospitable to differences. Right now, we look like a very anxious bunch. You just look at the behavior of us on social media. We are not looking cool, calm, and collected. You know, and and our young people are watching us. The world is watching us, and they're like, "Why would I join that group?" They're just freaking out. The world is ending. You know, and so the one thing I would say, if you have a neighbor who's living a beautiful life, who's a Muslim, is that one of the things, maybe the best things you could do is maybe not evangelize her, but evangelize the world in a beautiful friendship that could emerge in that location. That people can kind of go like, oh, that's kind of, I would like, you know, that they would be drawn in by the beauty of your response in that relationship. And so create some relationships across those cultural differences. Now then we can have a longer conversation about, you know, whether or not that relationship then could bear fruit for Christ in that person's life. But we don't get anywhere near that conversation unless we're seeing friendships across those margins. And so I would facilitate a hospitable relationship with that neighbor as a witness to the world. Because I think that communicates the sense that this whole thing isn't fragile. See, that's what anxiety communicates. And this is why I really wish we'd be more non-anxious. And I know it's a hard time not to be anxious because it seems like everything's at stake and there's a lot of political fighting. But let me just say this. When we are anxious, it makes it look to the world that this whole thing is very fragile. It's like a house of cards. That's what we communicate. That we're gripping on like this. And so if we can just be non-anxious, then we can have interfaith dialogue with people in a non-anxious way, because it suggests that God and the church is not at risk in this. Right? We can welcome people, but nothing is at risk here because God is greater than any of us. It's not on us to keep this boat afloat. So that's maybe one way to answer the question.
I like that answer.
Yeah.
Let me take a shot.
I mean, the ultimate destiny of world religions, here's the thing. I'm not going to answer that for you, okay? You didn't pay me to wade in on that kind of thing. But here, I want to be clear about that. That is a question an increasingly pluralistic world is asking. You know, and so that is a question that's going to be on your radar screen. And so you have to talk about, you know, religious difference. And I think beginning with non-anxious hospitality is a good way to begin that conversation in your home and in this community.
The thing that, so we're doing a series on the Holy Spirit here at this church, if you're just a guest. And one of the things you can find, you can Google this right now, and you can find it from non-religious sources. Like it's a true sociological thing that's happening in Muslim majority parts of the world, is that an increasing amount of people, thousands, tens of thousands of people, have come to faith as Jesus as the Messiah through dreams. Now, you can Google that. Like, that is a true thing. And so one of the things about being a non-anxious presence, I remember when the rise of ISIS, and again, that's a very marginal part of Islam and not the person described in this thing, but when my anxiety went up, when all of a sudden there were these people doing horrible things,
Yeah.
and that I actually was in Jordan when I found out about ISIS for the first time, which was like one of their main places. And so I had a reason to be nervous. And then, you know, after a few months of watching this horrible news, hearing that God is bringing Muslims to Jesus in their dreams, you can orchestrate that. And so one of the things I would say in response to this, and then another thing, what Samuel, my 11-year-old son, asked me, is Gandhi going to heaven? And I was like, come on, Samuel, that's a really hard question to answer. And so my answer for him was, let's read The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia. And if you really want to know an answer to this question, that's pretty nuanced and I think pretty deeply Christian, read that. Okay, last question.
I'll let you answer all those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last question that I have here. Does anybody else have anything else they want to turn in to Brother Nelson in the back, if you do. Otherwise, this is going to be the last question. And then we've got dessert. That dessert and fellowship and just time to hang out. Fellowship, by the way, for non-church people is just what it just means hanging out and fist bump and talking about how about them hogs 2 weeks ago. So, if faith is a choice, this is a two-part question.
Okay.
Oh, hey, they're the two-questioner. Yeah. If faith is a choice, is doubt a choice? And then follow up, is it okay to doubt God, and are there consequences of doubt?
So is it okay to doubt God? Yeah, that was my point at the beginning. Like that is, there are more lament psalms than there are praise psalms. I don't know, like the Songbook of Israel was psalms of lament and questioning, where God are you? So questioning God's care or affection. Yeah, so doubt is a legitimate way with God. And I love the fact that the heart of our faith is this mysterious cry from the cross where God himself says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like, that is like mind-boggling that for a second God has a question mark in his history. Mm-hmm. Like in the incarnation, there at least is one documented question mark. And for somebody who has a lot of questions, I just like how that question mark is sacralized, right? Made holy because it was uttered by the Lord. That we all have moments of, my God, why have you forsaken me? So I think, yes, it's okay to doubt. The thing I would say, though, is, is that doubt creates then this issue, doubt's okay, it's how do we respond to it? How do we carry that forward? How do we rehabilitate it? So that's what I was trying to suggest. Like, we lean into seasons of the practice of the faith. Like, you keep going to church, you keep praying, you keep following Jesus, you keep trying to live a beautiful life while that doubt's going on. What I think happens with a lot of us is that we have so privileged believing that we've felt like everybody's got to believe all the things before they can show up on a Sunday. And I'm just saying, no, you're supposed to keep coming in the middle of all that, and we are a people that can talk about those kinds of things here. So, yes, I think you can. What's the first part of the question?
Is faith a choice? Is doubt a choice? It wasn't for me. Was it for you?
Was doubt a choice? I do think everything is a choice in the sense that everything is a kind of a bit of a tension. So one of the reasons why I think I persisted so long in my season of agnostic belief or whatever was like my intellectual diet. Like, I just was really investing heavily in reading books that were deconstructing faith and those kinds of things. And those are choices. So I'm not choosing my doubt per se, but I'm getting back to the dancing gorilla, focusing my attention. And if that's all I attend to, then it becomes pretty obvious to me that God doesn't exist. Not because of the evidence, but because of what I was willing to consider. And that places like the prison or Freedom Fellowship, where we spend time with our friends on the margins, put other things back into my attention. So I don't know if you're choosing faith or not faith, but you're definitely choosing the diet or the ecosystem of your attention. That is your choice, what you're willing to consider. Yeah.
So just in closing, before we go to cake and brownies and stuff, when I worked with Brother Richard, I did this series called Christians Make the Best Atheists. And I mean, you remember that?
I do remember it.
And I ended by saying something that, you were an elder, so you didn't fire me. And
we thought about it a lot. Every elder was meeting, like, so storm it, It was always on the agenda.
Yeah, that's right. It just kept coming up.
Go read his Bible, and Jonathan Storm it, continued employment.
So, I have, and you and I both do, we have so many people that we love, that I grew up with, that faith just became too heavy for them to hold on to. And one of the questions that I've asked when they feel like they hit rock bottom and they just got to walk away from it all is, do you want to believe in God? Because if you do, the Christian tradition says that's enough. And what Brother Richard just said, I want to end with. I say this to so many of my friends. I want you to know it deep down in your soul. I want you to, if you're here and this whole thing is because somebody was telling you, like, we're going to take you to dinner afterwards and pay for it and whatever. Listen, if you want to believe in God, The resources are there. It's not just, it gives mental health and gives you a foundation to live your life on. But if it's really heavy for you, this is the word I want you to know. G.K. Chesterton, 100 years ago, wrote a book called Orthodoxy in a world where Europe was fast becoming post-Christian. And he talked about that line, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he said, the Christian faith is the only one in for which one brief instance, God himself was an atheist. And I can't shake that line. Because in your incredible pressure of doubt, and the incredible weight that is, if you want to believe in God, God can meet you